Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Fabric Coffee at Microsoft Fabric Cafe. My name is Merdad Abdullahi, the community lead of Microsoft Fabric Cafe. I'm very excited to just host this session where we have Kevin. But before that, just let's see where we have the audiences. You can just write in the chat where you're connecting from, and immediately let me just jump into my slides. So today is August 17. Every Saturday, we have the Fabric Coffee session with amazing speakers. And for today, I will just like always, introduction of the cafe and Microsoft Learn. Our guest speaker is Kevin, and during the session, during Kevin's presentation, you can just write your questions in the chat, and at the end of the session, we will have some riddles designed by our dear guest speaker, and the who is going to resolve them will be prized by exam vouchers. So Microsoft Learn, everyone knows that, but is the community of Microsoft Learn actually, which is a place for learning and sharing together, right? And we've got a lot of learning rooms in Microsoft Learn community that you can join based on the technologies that are there, or based on your interest. You can meet your peers, your learners, actually your experts, and just share your ideas or ask the questions. We can just learn and grow together. Here is the link to just join the learning rooms within Microsoft Learn. And especially for Microsoft Fabric Cafe, if you haven't joined, just hit that tiny URL below to join Fabric Cafe, which is a learning room within Microsoft Learn. We are focusing on Microsoft Fabric, of course, and we provide learning and support to Fabric users in all levels, which is actually a forum for everyone, to learn, share, and grow skills together. And here are the socials of our community. You can just watch the latest, live sessions and videos in our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on LinkedIn for getting the latest updates regarding Microsoft Fabric or even Microsoft Learn and whatever that is related to that one, and also the learning room. And this QR code just will land you to the LinkedIn page. There's a code of conduct. Of course, everyone is going to adhere to that. Thank you very much in advance for adhering to the code of conduct that we have in our cafe. And also in actually in our cafe, we serve Fabric with different flavors, with data engineering, data ingestion, data warehousing, business intelligence, data science, and real-time intelligence. And today it's going to be kind of data engineering stuff, where we are just actually we have Kevin, who is going to talk about SQL Server, right? So far in August, we had 3 sessions. That was fantastic with Armando, Brian, and Reza. And today we have Kevin as our guest speaker. Let me just add Kevin to the stage. Hey, Kevin, how's it going? We can hear you. It is maybe your mic is on mute.
You are absolutely correct. I put myself on mute just now to grab a quick drink, thinking that nobody would notice, and now everybody has noticed.
Cool. Very welcome to Microsoft Fabric Cafe. Kevin, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks. It's a nice, very hot day here in the Netherlands. I think currently it's 30 degrees where I am at this moment in time.
Okay, cool. Let me just have a look at the comments. So we have Abhishek from India. Welcome. Yeah, Sudhansu from India also. Thank you very much for joining. And Johnny, hey, good afternoon from Norway. Oh, nice. Cool. Kevin, let me just add your presentation to the stage. Guys, just keep in mind, you can just always ask your questions. Let me just you can ask your questions in the middle of Kevin's presentation. I will interrupt him. Yeah, and with this, you cannot actually you actually we won't lose the traction of the presentation and the session. So, Kevin, stage is yours, and guys, enjoy the learning with Kevin.
Thank you very much. And yeah, today's session is spreading your SQL Server Wings with Microsoft Fabric. As was mentioned just now, it will be focused quite a lot on data engineering, but I do cover other elements of Fabric as well, as you will all see shortly, because I want to highlight to everybody where you can translate your existing SQL Server skills into Microsoft Fabric. And there are quite a few different areas where you can do that, more than some people realize. So, a bit about myself before we get started. My name is Kevin Chant. I'm a data platform MVP. And in addition to that, I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. Today is ideal for me because I'm a big fan of Microsoft Fabric and coffee. I've worked in IT for quite some time, and over the years, I've worked in various different sectors, including the banking, oil, and health insurance industries. Over that time, I've gained various certifications, including the latest one for Fabric. I'm also an organizer for a couple of things. So, as you can see on the right side of the slides, I'm actually one of the organizers of the Data Weekender conference. And in addition to that, the Dutch Fabric user group as well. Now, you can find me in a few different places online. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, etc. I also have my own blog where I post a lot about data platform and developer technologies, quite often the two together, and more recently, the two together in respect to Microsoft Fabric. So if we're looking to do things like Git integration, CI/CD, etc., feel free to have a look. I also have my own GitHub site as well, where I tend to share a lot of repositories that you can download and use as a template to perform certain tasks such as CI/CD for Azure SQL databases, SQL pools, more recently Fabric data warehouses. So the agenda for this session, I'll do a unique introduction to Microsoft Fabric, hopefully still unique. Then I'll do some demonstrations and show you where your SQL Server experience can come in handy. Like I said, will be a focus on data engineering, but it will be other aspects as well. As part of that, I'll mention some recent T-SQL updates. Then it says Q&A and then riddles here, but in reality, I will probably go and do the other way around so we can do the riddles first for everybody. We'll see what happens. So let's go straight into the introduction of Microsoft Fabric, and I'll just check now, see if there's any comments coming in. So I'm sure by now some of you have seen a diagram similar to this before, which represents the architecture for Microsoft Fabric. However, unlike most of the ones you've seen, I have added industry solutions now, because technically in the eyes of Microsoft, they see that as a component of Fabric. So I will kindly share, I think, or can I actually put it directly in the chat? Oh, I will put it directly in the chat. There's a link where you can go and view about the components of Fabric. So you can all go and have a look there. So as you can see in the top right-hand corner, the 4 pillars that Microsoft Fabric are based on. So comprehensive analytics platform, where everything's available in one software as a service solution. It's lake-centric and open because everything's stored in a unified storage solution, ideally in the same format. However, when you're working with things like lake houses, it's not necessarily the case. It empowers every business user because you can start using Fabric using applications you're familiar with. So typically at this stage, I mentioned about using, for example, PowerPoint for Power BI reports. However, in the context of SQL Server, I would say actually using tools like SQL Server Management Studio and Azure Data Studio. And it's AI powered as well, because as you may be aware of, there are multiple Copilot experiences within Microsoft Fabric now. Now, just to help with some terminology, everything you see above OneLake is referred to as either an experience or workload. So when Fabric was first announced, there tend to be called experiences. However, over time, more people have started calling them workloads. And as I mentioned, there is now an additional one of industry solutions. In addition, I always recommend when you're looking to deploy Fabric within an enterprise, you have two different groups of services configured as well. One is Microsoft Purview for your compliance and governance needs, and the other one is either Azure DevOps or GitHub for Git integration and your CI/CD requirements as well, because as some of you may be aware, Microsoft Fabric Git integration now also allows you to have GitHub as a provider. As I mentioned earlier, OneLake is the unified storage solution in Fabric. You can save files of all different types in OneLake. However, ideally you should be saving Delta tables using the Parquet format essentially, or what's known as the Delta format inside OneLake. So the data in those tables can be read by the various different workloads. And I'll quickly go through those workloads now for you. So we have Data Factory, and this is where you orchestrate the movement of data within Microsoft Fabric, typically if you're using either data pipelines or data flows. Power BI for your business intelligence requirements, which is the same as before, only not because there's been some innovations and optimizations which have been introduced since Microsoft Fabric. And the reality is, if you have some Power BI experience, you can actually use those skills in Microsoft Fabric as well, because Microsoft Fabric is based on the Power BI architecture. Next, we have Data Activator, and this is where you can create event-driven alerts. When I explain this to people, I tend to say that allows you to be data-driven plus. Now you have industry solutions. Like I said, most people don't tend to associate industry solutions with workload. However, it is deemed as a component in Fabric. And when you first go into Fabric, it is listed amongst the other workloads there. Now, these industry solutions you deploy so you can get up to speed faster with reporting in different areas, for example, either in retail or manufacturing, or for sustainability requirements. And all of these different industry solutions have inside them capabilities, so there's like subcomponents you can think of. So for example, in sustainability, you have a capability called ESG data estate, which you can use to store all your environmental, social, and governance metrics. Now we have Synapse Data Engineering, and this is where you typically work with the Lakehouse paradigm at scale through lakehouses and notebooks. Then you have data warehouses, and this is where the reality is those with a SQL Server background can utilize most of your T-SQL skills, because this is based on a SQL compute engine and allows you to query data using T-SQL at scale. Next is real-time intelligence, which was formerly known as real-time analytics, and this allows you to ingest and query streaming data at scale. And finally, data science, and this is where your data scientists can collaborate together within a Microsoft Fabric workspace to share things such as experiments, models, notebooks, etc. And to be honest with you, it's quite interesting that data science is in Fabric. It's got some interesting things integrated with it. For example, MOflow and the Synapse NL library, and more recently the semantic link libraries that people can use to do various things like query the contents of semantic models. So this leads to some interesting integration possibilities, because all of these different workloads, they don't all work in silos. They can integrate together and work together. So for example, when you're working with Data Factory, the destination can be either a lakehouse, warehouse, or a K2O database. When you're working at a lakehouse, you can query the contents of tables in a data warehouse. And if you're working with a data warehouse, you can query your Delta tables in a lakehouse. An important point I want to stress here, it does have to be Delta tables in the lakehouse to query them. When you're working with real-time intelligence, you can use it to generate out data to be stored in a lakehouse or for data activator alerts. However, real-time intelligence isn't the only source of alerting within Microsoft Fabric, because you can create alerts within Power BI reports as well to be used by Data Activator. And as I mentioned just now, when you're working with the data science workload, you can query the contents of your Power BI semantic models. And when you're working within either a lakehouse, a data warehouse, or with real-time intelligence, you can quickly create a Power BI report in a few clicks. And if you're working with tables that are stored in either a lakehouse or a data warehouse, you can query those tables using the newer direct lake mode within Power BI. There are some conditions for that, but it is highly performant when it works. Now, this can lead to some interesting scenarios. So say, for example, you have an Azure SQL database somewhere. You can ingest data from Azure SQL database using either directly with a data pipeline or through a data flow, which you can then store the output to in a data warehouse. So set data warehouse as destination, which will store the contents of the table in OneLake, which you can then query using direct lake mode in Power BI. And as you can imagine, this is just one of the thousands of different combinations that you can use to actually work with data within Microsoft Fabric. And you'll see more of this during the course of the session. So now I'm going to go straight in to do all of the different demos for today. As you can see, there are a long list of different things I will be covering. So I will try and get through them as fast as possible. So first of all, I am going to cover the data warehouse. Oh, and I've got ahead of myself there, because the data warehouse in reality is where you can take advantage of your SQL Server background the most, because you can use your T-SQL knowledge there. So let's go straight into Microsoft Fabric. So actually, before I do data warehouse, I do want to point something else out. Those of you who are SQL Server administrators and are looking to potentially one day become Fabric administrators will be pleased to know there are a lot of settings that you can configure in Microsoft Fabric for different scenarios. So there is an entire settings section here. So if I zoom in a bit more, you can see there's a preferences section. So for just general settings, etc. The resources and extensions, if you are looking to become a Fabric administrator, or even if you just want to secure connections to your SQL Server databases, you will go to this section and go to the manage connections and gateways section, because this is where you would manage your data gateways to connect to your on-premises SQL Server databases. And then for governance and insights, there's the admin portal and the Microsoft Purview Hub. So if I click on the admin portal, and I won't focus too long here, you can see there's a lot of admin settings you can configure. The one I will highlight for anybody who's looking to create their own Microsoft Fabric environment to work with is make sure that you have the users can enable Fabric items enabled. As you can see here, there's a whole variety of options. I'm not even going to scroll down all of this. I'm going to give you 2 key pieces of advice to make your life easier when working with the tenant settings. First of all, there's a filter by keyword option in the top right hand corner. So if you know roughly the setting, just type it in there. Secondly, in the Microsoft Documents Online, they have an entire index for every single tenant setting, going into detail about what it's about. So I do recommend looking there as well. As you can see, there's other things that we can configure here, including capacity settings, which can be quite important if you are looking to secure Fabric and make sure it's using the right capacities, as well as a whole load of other various settings. This is only a 60-minute long session, so I'm not going to go through all of this here. Right, so the other thing I will say very quickly, though, those of you who have worked with governance and compliance in SQL Server will be pleased to know that there is actually now a Microsoft Purview Hub in Fabric. And here it will give you various information which you have stored in Purview relating your governance and compliance. Now, some of you may have a Purview infrastructure already set up in the enterprise. Some of you may not have a Purview infrastructure set up at all. However, one key point to realize is that when you do start working with Fabric, it does do a default scan of your workspace items in Purview for you, whether or not you have a Purview infrastructure in place. And you can view that yourself. If you have your own Fabric environment, just go to the new Purview portal and you'll see it all in there. And I can actually show you how that looks here. So you will come to a Purview portal like this. This is the new Purview portal, by the way. And you can navigate to various places. So those of you who have already worked with Purview and SQL Server, for example, can go to Data Catalog. And from there, you can actually click on Microsoft Fabric, select Fabric Workspaces. This is all done, this part, without configuring anything at all, by the way. And you will see that it does a default scan of all your workspaces in Fabric. Now, it will list various items you have within a particular workspace. However, it's something to bear in mind is that it will only give a high-level overview. If you want deeper scanning, like the contents of tables, etc., you will have to make sure you have your licensing configured, etc., beforehand. This was just to quickly show you that you can do this in Purview. Anyway, now let's dive into the different items. So I'm first going to cover warehouses. Like I said, this is where you can translate your SQL Server background the most, because you can bring your skills over to there. So to give you a quick example, when you work with a warehouse directly in Fabric, you'll work with what's known as a warehouse editor. And as you can see at the top, there's various options that I can work with. I can start ingesting, click on one of these and try and start ingesting data, set up a new SQL query, set up something called a visual query, which I'll show you shortly, create a new report quickly, new measure, and now, and this is a recent addition, you can download a SQL database project. So those of you who worked with SQL Server in the past may have already had exposure to database projects, which are basically the schema of your database shown as code, and then you can use that database project to perform, for example, continuous integration and continuous deployments within the enterprise. Now, here in the warehouse editor, there's a reporting tab as well, as you can see clearly at the top. When you first go into it, if you do have any tables, it will try and preview the first one straight away. But as you can see here, you can start working with T-SQL queries straight away. These are basic examples. As you can see, I can create and insert into tables. I can then start dealing with things like aggregation queries as well, using the same T-SQL syntax that we've worked with over the years. I can create views, query views, and I can do something rather interesting now. I can work with visual queries. These visual queries are based on Power Query to an extent. So, for example, what I can do, just like in Power Query, as I build up these different steps, I can click on a previous step to view the state of the data beforehand. And as you can see, there's various different things I can work with here to build up the visual query. I can even view the SQL behind the scenes. Now, those of you with a T-SQL background like myself, I will apologize in advance before I show you this, because it's probably not the quality of T-SQL you're used to when you're working with queries, just due to the aliases, etc. But most important thing is it works. I can also save the results of my visual query as a view as well if I want to. So that's a very quick introduction there to visual queries. It can be quite powerful. But of course, if you do have T-SQL experience, you can start working with it quickly in the warehouse here and save it. Either save it as your own query, so only you can view it, or as a shared query, as you can see here, for others to work with as well. And there are other things you can do directly in the warehouse here. So, for example, I can use query insights to quickly gain results from certain queries, etc. So as you can see, there's been a few queries being run in my data warehouse as of late. If I go back into the data warehouse, I just want to quickly show you something that I did mention earlier. So as I mentioned earlier, when you are working in a data warehouse, you can query your nicely curated Delta tables in a lakehouse. And in fact, what I'll actually do first, I will show you in the lakehouse that I've got some tables, because then it will help you understand this better. And in fact, that's the one. I'll actually just show you directly from the warehouse. It'd be easier. So I have another warehouse, a lakehouse, stored in a completely different workspace. And that's got multiple tables in there. But what I can actually do, if I go here, I can create a view in a warehouse that actually queries a table in the lakehouse. So for example, like in the lakehouse I showed you just now, where it's got that table in there, if I just put in the name of the lakehouse and then just specify the default DBO schema, followed by that Delta table name, I can query that Delta table that's in the lakehouse directly from a data warehouse. So I just wanted to give you that nice tip. It's a question I get asked a lot. How can we query a lakehouse table from a data warehouse? And here is your answer. You can just put in this three-part naming convention, lakehouse name, the default DBO schema, followed by the Delta table name. And like I said earlier, it does have to be a Delta table. And bear in mind as well that in the future, when schemas appear in the lakehouse, you will be able to have to specify those as well. Now I do have to close objects here to make sure I've got enough the canvas. So as you can see here, I've just got some more advanced SQL. Now this is only a 60-minute session. I could go into further details here about warehouses. I could, for example, highlight the fact that you work with security the same as you work with security on SQL Server with the same grant deny T-SQL syntax. That also applies here in Fabric, so you can lock down a warehouse in multiple places, either at the workspace level by managing workspace access or by using the T-SQL in the warehouse itself. What I will highlight though, and as some of you I think actually noticed earlier as well, I will highlight some of the newer updates. So what I will do first, and actually something before I cover this, I do also want to stress Microsoft do highlight the T-SQL Service area for a data warehouse. And as you can see on the left-hand side, you can kind of do some other things as well. There are a few ways you can look to work with primary, foreign, and unique keys. Just be a bit careful about the constraints there, as well as other things like working with GUIs, transactions, etc. And what I will do here, as long as I get the link for it up, I will put these into the chat in a minute. The other thing I need to make sure you're aware of, there are limitations with T-SQL at this moment in time, and there are also some other limitations as well with warehouses with some of the features. So with these in mind, I will put the link in the chat. And I see there's a question here, where are these queries computed? And they're computed in the actual Fabric capacity by a different compute engine. So as I mentioned earlier, when you deploy Fabric, you work with capacities or one or more capacities. These capacities are where the compute is actually performed. So when the bottom line is, when you get the bill or when you pay the bill for your capacity, that is the computer. You are actually paying for this compute that's being done. So for example, if you go to the admin portal, again, I will just highlight this to answer the question. So back in the capacity settings, wherever your capacity is backed, because I'm aware some people still are using Power BI premium capacities to work with Fabric. However, a lot more people are now using Fabric capacities that are backed in Azure. So that's a main difference for those. That's where the compute is performed in these actual capacities when you do the queries. I hope that answers your question for you. If you're like me and you've got a trial set up, then the capacity will be running in that trial capacity instead, of course. So, what's the difference? Another question. What is the difference between this Fabric and Azure Data Studio? So you mean with respect to working with the warehouse directly and within Azure Data Studio? Because the warehouse editor is directly within Fabric. And as I'm due to show you in a few minutes' time, so this question has kind of jumped the gun a bit, but we will cover this now instead, because I can adapt. So when you're working with this warehouse editor, you're working directly in Fabric. And what you can do, and this is very similar concept to when you work with Azure SQL databases, if I'm honest, you can click on the settings here, and this will provide you with a connection string. So let's make sure here you can see there's a settings section next to get data. If you click on there, straight away it will show you a connection string which you can use to connect up to using Azure Data Studio. I'm not going to click that here because this session is being recorded. So yeah, strangely enough, I mean, I trust all of you, but I think it's a good idea not to share that connection string. Once you get that connection string, you can then go into Azure Data Studio like so. Go and then connect directly to the data warehouse. Now, this is the same data warehouse I showed you just now in Fabric. I'm connecting to it through the endpoint in Microsoft Fabric itself. And then from there, I can start working with it the same as I would do with a SQL Server database, etc. I can run queries using this connection, do whatever I want, including one thing in particular, which I will cover now since I was asked about Azure Data Studio. So another thing I can do is I can install the SQL Database Project extension. So just like earlier where we could click on Download Database Project, what I can actually do instead, if I'm using Azure Data Studio, is right-click the Data Warehouse connection and select Create Project from Database. Fill out this nice wizard, the same as what you would do for SQL Server Database. And just like if you do this for a SQL Server Database, it creates a database project for me, just like the one you see here. And taking it one step further, just like what you can do with SQL Server databases, you can then synchronize your local Git repository that stores that database project with a Git repository you have stored in Azure DevOps. And then from there, and I think some of you probably know where I'm going with this, you can then look to deploy updates to other Fabric data warehouses. So for example, I can show you how this is done with the classic pipeline. As you will see, this is conceptually the same as when you do this with SQL Server. So I can take that database project. As you can see here, I'm specifying the SQL proj file for it. I'm creating the DATPack file, exactly the same as how you do it for SQL Server and other SQL related databases. And then once that DATPack is created, I can just create a release and deploy it to a new Fabric data warehouse. And I can also do that with a YAML pipeline as well if I want to, but due to the time, I think I won't show you all of that now. So yeah, so it is very much similar. You can connect up using Azure Data Studio and do all your same queries on there. Of course, just like when you're working in a data warehouse editor, the T-SQL limitations still apply because you're still running the query against the compute in Fabric. Oh, it disappeared for a while there. Apologies for the delay, everybody. So, in addition to the links I sent you just now, there, as you can see, there were some new T-SQL updates introduced earlier this year. I want to highlight these because not everybody is aware they're available yet. So this includes CSV parser 2. So if you're using, for example, the copy into command with CSV files, it can use the faster parser now to copy the contents of them into your data warehouse. The SP rename store procedure is now supported in the data warehouse. In addition to that, so is the trim function that a lot of you have used over the years. Dynamic data masking is now supported in data warehouses. You can also clone tables with time travel, and you can also work with statistics to improve performance of queries. More recent T-SQL support for SQL data warehouses includes time travel for select statements. Now, I quite like this. This is great. So you can run a select statement with join to multiple tables. And then at the end of your select statement, just put in as of and give it a timestamp. That will give you the result of how your query, how the data was for your query at a particular moment in time. So say I wanted to see how the state of my data was for a particular select 2 days ago. I create my select statement, do the same as usual, all my joins. and then put in the syntax at the end of my select statement. And yeah, I will get back how my data was today, how my select statement would have looked if I'd run it 2 days ago, which I think is great. And as some of you may have seen recently on social media, the truncate command is supported as well. Now, I'll quickly look in the chat here to see what's coming in question-wise. So the question is, the more the data Parquet files, the more maintenance, the less the Parquet can be optimized. How are the balances for a warehouse while maintaining, creating tables? So yeah, there are optimization mechanisms already in place for working with the Parquet tables in Fabric. So it's worth looking at the links I sent over. If you follow those towards the main data warehouse documentation, it does mention about the optimization being performed. So I just wanted to highlight that here because, again, stress that. So going back into Microsoft Fabric. So that is the warehouse support in a nutshell. I will quickly show you other things now. I'm looking at time permitting. This is going to be interesting. So another thing I want to highlight is that you can now perform mirroring from certain databases. So for example, if you have an Azure SQL database or a database in Cosmos DB or a Snowflake database, you can now mirror the contents of that database by different ways into Fabric. So for example, if I click on File and click on More Options, scroll down, click on, for example, Mirror Azure SQL Database. Of course, I'm doing an online demo, so it's going to take its time. When it does come up, basically you do a click, click, click wizard. And as long as you've got everything configured in place, this is a high-level overview, by the way. It is a bit more you have to do for this. Then you can have your mirrored database in place. Now, just this week, if I remember correctly, Microsoft did publish a post on how you can actually use transactional replication on your local SQL database to replicate data tables to your Azure SQL database, which can then be used for mirroring. Sounds a bit complex, but those of you who are at the speed of setting up transactional replication in SQL Server can take advantage of your experience to actually help configure this within the enterprise, because it's using 2 supported features. I will very quickly show you how a mirrored database looks. So for example, I have one here that's mirrored from Cosmos DB. Well, I've actually got a couple here from Cosmos DB. So when I first click on the mirrored database, it will give me various details about it running, and I can stop the replication, etc. However, to query the data, what I can do, if I click at the top, you'll see I've got 2 options. And the second one is SQL Analytics Endpoint. If I click on here, it actually opens up for me a read-only version of the warehouse editor that I can start working with. So you can leverage your T-SQL background to query data that's been mirrored from other types of databases, which I think is really good. So if you have data coming over from Cosmos DB or Snowflake, you can actually query the data using T-SQL if you want to. So that's a very high-level overview there of mirrored databases. And I do have a blog post that covers how to do it from Cosmos DB if anybody's interested. So next, there's lakehouses. Now, for those of you who may have yet to, well, those of you yet to see it, you work with lakehouses predominantly 2 different ways in Fabric. One is using the lakehouse editor for all of your GUI-based methods, and the other is working with notebooks. So I'm going to cover lakehouse editor first. So as you can see here, and I'll make this a bit bigger for all of you, you can either put data directly into the files section, and this can be any type of data, or you can have data ingested into nicely curated Delta tables. Now, you can create shortcuts to both files and tables that are stored elsewhere. So, for example, here I can create a new shortcut, and then I can just select the location here. However, there are two things, especially for those with SQL background, I want to highlight here. First of all, performance, maintaining your Delta tables as they get larger. It may be over time, depending on how the data has been ingested and set up, you may need to perform optimization on them. Luckily, using the GUI-based method, there is a maintenance option here. So those of you with a SQL Server performance tuning background who are keen on performance tuning in Fabric may be keen to know that this option exists for you to work with in the GUI-based method. You can do similar in notebooks as well. In addition to that, other key thing I want to highlight, again, you have the option of using the SQL Analytics endpoint. So for example, here I have two tables, dim product and dim sales. If I click on SQL Analytics endpoint, you can see those tables here. Now, one thing I must stress, if for some reason I've created external tables there, which are not Delta, and they've appeared for some reason in the tables section, they will not appear here in the Analytics endpoint. This will only show you nicely curated Delta tables. So bear that in mind. But I wanted to show you all this because it means, again, you can run T-SQL against tables that are in your lakehouse.
Excuse me, Kevin. There is a question, maybe while you're still in the previous one, regarding the mirroring. Is mirroring work as change data capture (CDC) or replicating the data? It is from actually
it's
Vishwa
more.
from
That's fine. It's more along the lines of using change data capture. To be honest, it depends on which database engine you're doing it from as well. So yeah, so it's not so much the replication you're used to, but it does depend on the database engine. And reach out to me after the session, and I'll go in a bit more detail about it because I have 12 minutes left to go through everything, if that's okay.
Always.
So yeah, it does depend on different factors, but it is more relating to change database technology. So the other thing I want to highlight as well very quickly before we look at the other technologies is working with Delta tables. Now, at this moment in time, when you look at a lot of the examples for Fabric online, they show you the examples on how to query using Python. However, the reality is that if I open up a notebook, and hopefully I'm opening up the right notebook, not necessarily, let me open up a better example for you all here. So reality is you can work with Python, but you can also work with Spark SQL as well. And this is where you can utilize your T-SQL development background as well, because you can use your SQL knowledge to write queries using Spark SQL, as you can see here. A lot of the constructs are very similar. And I'm showing regular selects here, but you can do some more advanced SQL statements if required. Obviously, useful selects, inserts, etc. You can do a lot more with Spark SQL as well. One quick tip I do want to highlight, and I was in the notebook just now, so I can click on it again quickly here. So, and I'll delete this just to highlight this again. So usually people show that when you're working with PySpark and you're working with your lakehouse, you can just drag and drop in table and it will give you the statement required. The reality is you can do the same for Spark SQL as well. So I can just drag this over and it will just give me the select. This is a quick way to do it, but it can be quite useful, especially for those from a SQL background, because it reminds you that when you're working with Spark SQL, you have to use limit instead of the top statement. Something that I know a lot of people from a SQL background still tend to do when they're working with Spark SQL and Fabric. So let's go back through now. So I will very quickly mention about data pipelines, I should say. So I just want to highlight here, if you've worked in the past with SQL Server integration services, you can transfer your knowledge over to start working with data pipelines. Those of you who've worked already with Azure Data Factory or with Synapse pipelines will realize that the canvas is very similar. However, there is a bit of feature parity at this moment in time, but there is a lot you can do here still. So, for example, in Fabric, in data pipelines, there are many places you can go to schedule your pipelines. There's a lot of different activities you can do already out of the box, as you can see, including the fast performant copy data activity. There are various activities here, as you can see, and I'm not going to go through all of these. What I will highlight, if I click on this particular one now, is that there is now the ability to call a nested pipeline, invoke another pipeline, basically. I've actually used this myself, and it is worth looking into if for some reason you need to use nested pipelines. But as you can see, there's a whole variety of other activities you can already do, and including, for example, the logic loops like you worked with in the past in integration services. Data flows as well. So, for example, I tend to say that data flows is low code, no code. And if I open this up quickly, this is based on Power Query. I just want to stress that you can use your SQL background when working with data flows as well, because a lot of things that you do within data flows is actually based on concepts that you would have learned from learning T-SQL. So to give you a good classic example, if I go to merge queries and data flows, and I select another query, when I scroll down, as you can see, it uses the same join types that you would have learned when you're working with T-SQL in the past. Now, for those of you wondering, I call data flows low code, no code, because what you can do is use the advanced editor. And this can be useful if you, say, for example, need to copy and paste updates to multiple queries. It can save a lot of clicking just by doing this instead. So as far as, there's a little interesting thing there. So I will quickly look at real-time intelligence, but I am aware, because some of you probably attended Brian's session on this already. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here. One thing I will highlight, or two things actually, if I can get the workspace opened up quick enough. So one thing I will highlight, you can conceptually think of Event House a bit like a SQL Server instance, because you store multiple KQL databases in there. However, for benefit of time, I'm not going to open that one up now because you probably saw it last week. The other thing I will quickly highlight is that if you can remember how to do a particular SQL query against a table in a KQL database, you can use the explain function to get the KQL alternative. I want to stress this even if you saw it last week, because it is better to use the KQL to query the data in your KQL database for performance reasons. So that's just where your SQL background can come in handy. As far as working with Power BI is concerned, the only thing I will highlight here very quickly is that now you can work just like with database projects for data warehouses, which are the same as SQL database projects. You also now have something called Power BI desktop projects, which basically allows you to save the metadata for reports and semantic models as code. This is how it looks. You would save this basically in Power BI desktop. So, but I won't show you the full steps now. But this is how it would look. And then you can do similar to what you do with SQL Server. You can do continuous integration tests against this code using, for example, the tabular editor client. So we have 4 minutes permitting. So let me just check. So for data activator, I will quickly open up a reflex item here. So for data activator, again, I am aware that reflex items were covered by Brian. The only thing I want to highlight here is that if you've been working with various third-party SQL products in the past, like a well-known compliance solution, you're probably aware that you do need to make sure you configure your triggers correct so you don't over monitor too much for your alerts, etc. So just like when you do that, and just like when you set up SQL Server Profiler as well, because you want to filter the events you monitor to reduce the amount of noise. You would do the same here in data activator. So only monitor and alert for what you actually need to reduce the amount of noise and compute used. So that's the main thing I wanted to get across as far as working with data activator and reflex items are concerned. So I have noticed the time now, so I think we will, as far as the demos are concerned, let's carry on with showing where to find more resources for everything. So I do a series of posts, including a whole series about how you can spread your SQL Server Wings with various products and various workloads within Fabric as well. So feel free to have a look there. Of course, there is Microsoft documentation as well you can go to look at, in addition to Microsoft Learn material. So one of the best ways to get up to speed with various different items in Fabric is through the Microsoft Fabric Learn material. I cannot stress this enough. It is a good starting point for people. And I recommend this even within the company that I work for. And of course, look at all the community contributions as well. So there's blog posts by other members of the community, other sessions that are being presented, etc. So that is it for now. I think we will go straight to the riddles first. I think that's the best option, and then do the questions afterwards.
Yeah. Kevin, before jumping to the riddles, I actually missed two comments to show. One of them is Siaka, thanks for joining from Nigeria. And also, Shamim just thanked you on LinkedIn. For some reasons, it wasn't actually shown in StreamYard. She just thanked you for the comprehensive intro for the Microsoft Fabric. Thank you very much. And then, you can just move forward with the riddles, please.
Right, that's fine. So I do have some interesting riddles for you all. So let's start with a relatively easy one to begin with. So riddle number one, as you can see, what likes to experiment but is not weird? I think, is it correct everyone can just put their answers into the chat?
Yeah, they can just put it in the chat and I will show them quickly and I will monitor the LinkedIn as well. So guys, who's gonna be our next exam voucher winner? The riddle designed by Kevin. Avishak says Microsoft Purview.
It's good, but unfortunately, it's not right.
It's not right.
I could give people a clue to this, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because obviously, riddles can be a play of words. So, my only clue on this is to think about any famous 80s movies which may be connected to this sentence. I'm thinking there's a few people on Google and Copilot now typing away to quickly look.
Industry Solutions?
No.
No. It was from LinkedIn. From Vishwa, I guess.
I mean, I do have some other riddles anyway. We'll give everybody, another 30 seconds or so to see if they can figure it out.
Nope, no, actually, no problem. We can just expand it, for another 5 minutes. No worries about the timing given. But yeah, maybe you can move forward.
I'll reveal the answer then. If there's nothing else coming into chat or LinkedIn. And I think a few people will probably go, yeah.
Data activator.
Do you know that LinkedIn user is very close? Very, very, very close.
Vishwa? You're very close to that, right?
They are very, very close. And that's as much as I can say. Okay. So I will give the answer for this one, and everybody else can say, oh, and then you know what to expect in the next riddle. Okay. So the answer was, everybody, data science. If you think I said famous 80s movie as a clue, that movie was Word Science. And of course, experiment. Okay, so next riddle. Even though I am new, you might need a DeLorean to choose me. What am I? I give everybody a clue this time. I definitely covered this in this session in a bit of detail. And I see somebody's been seeing the famous meme online.
Yeah.
No, not Ghostbusters, obviously. So have a think, everybody, what I covered in today's session. Is there something that you think this riddle might apply to?
Jyoti says CSV files.
My clue for this one is to read the words I use in the sentence again very carefully.
Canadian says Spark. You may move to the end.
I will go to the answer shortly. I will give everybody one last clue, even though this could flood. Somebody says SQL. Whoever said SQL, you are on the right track. There you go. That's a big clue, surely. And like I said, read the sentence very carefully, everybody. Give everybody a few more seconds.
Shamim says Data Factory in the LinkedIn, but it doesn't show here. Data Factory from Shamim.
So there is somebody who is actually fairly close with their one-word answer. Very, very close with their one-word answer. If they'd elaborated on their one-word answer, they would definitely get the right answer for the riddle.
And from
I think
Georgie,
that's a very big clue for everybody. If somebody elaborated on one of their answers a bit more, they would get it right. Okay,
TSQL.
if two people elaborated a bit more on their answer, they could get it right. But one person definitely in particular.
Townsend says TSQL.
Okay. I mean, I could say something now and then maybe get a flood of them. That it is
Time travel from Shamim.
Where's the time travel come from? I'm seeing
It
T-SQL.
is actually from LinkedIn, but it doesn't show in the chat
Right.
here.
Whoever just said that on LinkedIn, by the way, congratulations. You've just won.
Yeah, Shamim, it is yours.
Finally.
Yeah,
There you
Shamim.
go.
Yeah, let me just. I will travel. So, yeah, just show her name here. Time travel.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Kevin. Then, thank you very much, Kevin, for the
That's
nice
right.
riddle.
I've got another
Yeah.
riddle. If you
Oh,
got,
is it?
I've got more
Another
riddles.
winner.
Yeah, I could be like a popular superhero villain at this rate. I have another riddle then, people, since I've got some in reserve. Despite the suggestion, I am strong all the time, not just every 2 weeks. What am I? And of course, the riddle is like most riddles, everybody, it is a play of words. Read the sentence, have a think. I do have another riddle after this one, so we'll make this one a bit shorter if nobody gets it straight away. So we'll give people a chance on LinkedIn as well a minute.
Yeah, because there's always, a delay between the destinations and platforms. So it's good
Indeed.
to wait a little bit.
That's fine. We'll wait and see if anybody else has got any answers for this. I think a few people may, as soon as I say the answer, they might go, I probably should have known that. So, okay, any
TSQL
answers?
statement level.
No.
TSQL statement level.
I will tell you now, everybody, it's not another T-SQL thing that was covered. Well, it's not a T-SQL statement that was covered.
Maybe another clue or real time from Z.
I saw real time come in. There, I'd give a big clue here. Real time is on the right track. I can give a clue for the riddle of another riddle. You are on the right track if you shift left. No, actually, tell I if you shifted right. So I'm answering giving a clue for a riddle with a riddle, but it's not mirroring, folks. And if you want to answer the riddle I just riddled, think about my introduction to fabric. That's a massive clue there, surely. My introduction to fabric, and I said you would be on the right track if you shifted right. Okay, well, I've got another riddle anyway, folks.
Data activator from Abhishek.
No. There's no more answers. I'll give this one. I have got another riddle in reserve anyway, and the next one as well. I've got
Cool.
a next one which might make a few people smile. So the answer to this one, everybody, I am strong all the time, not just every 2 weeks, as in not just bi-weekly or even Power BI. So that's your answer, folks, for this particular one. Like I said, it was a play on words, like all riddles.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do have another riddle. I guess certain people may get this one. We shall see. I am a storage area full of androids from within the enterprise. What does that make me?
From ZY
So I
real-time forecast.
remember that these riddles I do like to play on words, folks. So have a read of it again.
Canaan says lake house.
I could give everybody a really big clue, and this clue would be really, really big. And then I think
Shamim
somebody would get.
says data engineering strong all the time. I think for the previous, yeah.
Okay,
But
oh
architect is about one lake. Sorry, I'm just bringing the answers up. Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. I'll wait a few more seconds before I give a clue for this, and it will be a big clue.
So
Whoever said why is just one. Said say why? Well, I do apologise if I'm pronouncing your name
uh,
incorrectly. It is indeed a storage area full of androids within the enterprise. So, for example, androids like Data from Star Trek, that would make you a
yeah,
data warehouse.
why data warehouse? Awesome.
So, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's like,
And yeah, Jyoti just came with the data leak. Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was fantastic. Nice riddles and two winners. Awesome, awesome.
I do
And
have
just
a, I mean, how many winners do you need? Two or three?
uh, yeah, we can go for free for three
We
actually.
can go for
Yeah,
three. Shall we try and see if a third person can win? I have one more riddle, everybody.
yeah, awesome. Why not?
Are we all mean or will we make you perform better? That's the riddle. I covered this today, everybody. And as you've gathered, I like to play on words for my riddles.
Yeah.
I will wait because I suspect a few people on LinkedIn will have a few answers for this as well.
Yeah, let me check on LinkedIn. Kevin, I really do like the riddle section of the live sessions that we have. It is an engagement one, and with each riddle, of course, we are going to learn a new thing, right? With fun, actually. And it is the, intention of our community, which is Microsoft Fabric Cafe. We make casual place to just drink your coffee and learn, just and learn with fun, actually. So, yeah,
Indeed. I really
thank
like
you.
my
Thank
coffee.
you for your.
It's fine. I have a coffee machine which, well, originally I had a coffee
Yeah.
machine imported from another country, but I've just recently upgraded it. So I will give
Uh,
everybody a big clue for this. A mathematician would really like this riddle. So read it again.
We have an answer from LinkedIn, data mirroring, and another answer from GOT analysis.
I'm afraid neither are correct. Like I said, a bit of a clue. Mathematician would really love this riddle. So, like I said, read the sentence again.
Shamim says real-time intelligence. Last one.
I can tell you it is definitely not a workload. I suspect I will either have to give another big clue or give the answer for this one.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see how quick people are on the keyboard then. I will give one more clue, and that's it. Um, this riddle, since it's the final one, I will give a very, very generous clue here. This riddle directly relates to something that I covered when we were talking about T-SQL updates in the data warehouse earlier.
We have data partitioning from LinkedIn, and also industry solution from Abhishek.
Okay, so like I said, this riddle is related to a T-SQL update that I covered earlier.
Very big
Somebody
clue.
is very close with one of their answers.
Optimization.
So the optimization, let me put it this way, final clue. The optimization answer is very, very close. Well, actually, both optimization answers are very close. Like I said, read the sentence again, everybody.
A feature in TSQL that was maybe released recently, right? For Fabric.
Yeah, maybe a T-SQL improvement that was added earlier this year.
Abhishek says as on update in TSQL.
We will give everybody a few more seconds before we reveal the answer. Like I said, folks, read the question again. Mathematicians would love it, and it's related to a T-SQL update I mentioned earlier.
Shamim says update statistics.
Do you know they've just won? Congratulations.
Statistics. Awesome. Shamim
So,
actually already had, they was actually the winner. But yeah, thank you very much for your engagement and being the active member, really, for all of you. We really appreciate it. And Kevin, thank you very much for your nice riddles and nice presentation, actually, and the unique, Microsoft Fabric introduction. And actually, I see, as we can see, attendees like that. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. Really, we do appreciate it. And once again, let me just add my start to the stage. So we have completed today's session with Kevin. Thank you very much. Really, that is fantastic. Folk, just stay tuned for the next sessions. The registration will be released soon for the Fabric Coffee sessions in August. And as always, it is a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for attending. And here you can just follow us on YouTube if you missed the part of the today's session, or you want to rewatch it. Of course, it will be available immediately on YouTube channel. Just follow us on LinkedIn for the latest updates, and join the learning room to meet your peers and experts and ask your questions. So, Kevin, one more time, thank you. Just there are some nice words, Granny, very thought-provoking riddles, and a great presentation. And Kevin, just thank you all for joining. Thank you for the great session from Sathunsa. And there are some, actually, Kevin's socials. You can just connect him after this meeting, of course. And I know how humble is actually Kevin is, and you can just reach out to him. So, and from Jyoti, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And if there is no more question or comments, we can just wrap up the session. And for the winners, congratulations again. Just send me on the YouTube, actually on LinkedIn, LinkedIn page of the Microsoft Fabric Cafe, or just reach out me in the learning room and share your email address with me, and the vouchers will be shared. And just keep in mind, when you pass the exam, of course DP600 for Microsoft Fabric, but of course the vouchers actually can be utilized for all the Microsoft exams. When you pass that, just mention Microsoft Fabric Cafe. Let's celebrate it together. Mention Kevin and myself. We can just celebrate it together. And Kevin says, I do some posts that can help with the DP600. Just follow Kevin's post on this exam, which is fantastic. You can just prove your skills and knowledge on Microsoft Fabric. Kevin, if you want to add something, please feel free to do that.
Sure.
But
I just like to thank you first for hosting and for having me today. And obviously, everybody watching, thank you very much for attending.
it was a pleasure for me, and for actually to have everyone here, which is making a fantastic community. And let's grow our community by sharing with others, and just sharing, the fun with others, actually. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you the next week. Cheers.
Thanks all. Bye.